sitting together to have a little conversation about Luke 15 and the parable of the two sons. The prodigal son is the more famous, but there's also an older brother involved. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about that. And Kami had a fun story to start us off.
So years ago, I was sitting casual circumstance with a minister friend, and he just happened to randomly mention that when he was a teenager, he had worked at a pig farm feeding the pigs. And I thought this was hilarious, right? I'm like, were you the prodigal son? And he kind of laughed and he was like, in some ways I am, or I was. He's like, what about you? So I stopped laughing. I totally identify as the older brother. I married another older brother, and we're raising older brothers for our children, right? We're rule followers. Like, I like the security of knowing that I'm in a good place, following the rules, and that my blessings are going to flow out of that. Did you hear how often I said my in that? Like, the downfall of the older brother perspective, this rule follower, which God wants us to be rule followers, right? Mm-hmm. But the downfall, of course, is that self-righteousness can take such a hold of you. And of course, the audience for the parable of the prodigal son was in part the Pharisees. Yeah. And so he was talking to like the chief rule followers. And these are the people that ended up standing in judgment against God's plan for mankind, deciding they knew better, and so they were going to kill Jesus. Like, I don't want to end up there, right?
Right.
But there's this story is so complex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what stood out to me was how you said that you felt security in your rule following. And that's just like the Pharisees, right? I mean, I'm not judging. I'm just saying.
No, 100%.
That's what you're saying, right? Is that it was the security not in God.
Right.
It was the security in doing what you're doing because you feel justified in that.
Right. So my big takeaway as a rule follower when I look at this story is I need to make sure that my motivation is in pleasing and loving God for his own sake, not for the sake of that security that I falsely believe I'm earning. Right? If I do it with the right heart, then I can avoid the pitfall of being self-righteous.
Right.
This is the crux of it for the older brother perspective, from my perspective.
Yeah. And that motivation, that's something that in the older brother in the parable, it's like we didn't see that yet, but we think, that's what the dad figure was getting to, right?
Right.
It's like, and he's out there, he's pleading with the older brother to come into the feast, right? Like he wants him to be part of his relationship in this house and says, all I have is yours, right? You got this, but you got to change the motivation, right? So
if I could insert here, we both read this really great book by a man named Timothy Keller, and it's called The Prodigal God. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about kind of came out of reading that book, but the focus of the book is actually on the intense love that the Father has, and that he is willing to do anything for his sons. And of course, as a reflection of God, Jesus is using this to say he's willing to come after the prodigal. He's willing to sacrifice everything to restore that son to him. But he's also begging the older brother, that self-righteous Pharisee. He's yearning to embrace that son too.